Over a decade ago, I reviewed TimeSplitters 2 on the GameCube, which to this day remains one of my favorite first-person shooters on the platform, as well as the 6th generation consoles period. Now, I finally want to look at its follow-up, Future Perfect, this time on the Xbox Classic. And how does this one hold up? Let's find out. Following directly after TimeSplitters 2, Sergeant Cortez returns to a war-torn Earth where the Time-Splitter conflict is at its hottest. After fighting off assassins and splitters alike, Cortez takes the time crystals back to his home base and becomes a partner to Anya with his next mission, where he must find where it all started for the Time-Splitters and eradicate the mad scientist responsible, Jacob Crow. Between early 20th century Scotland, espionage missions in the late 60s, haunted houses in the 90s, and even a Terminator-like post-apocalyptic setting. Unlike TimeSplitters 2, where it felt like a cluster of a story, Future Perfect is easier to follow, particularly because you actually play as Cortez himself through the whole game, rather than being forced to transform into other characters. Plus, you go after a primary villain even as you team up with people throughout TimeSplitters history, including Captain Ash and Harry Tipper, who were both playable in TimeSplitters 2. But it's entertaining, so not much in the way of complaints from me. The like, say, with Duke Nukem 3D, the humor might be hit or miss with some people, even though it's nowhere near as raunchy. Except, maybe...
It's not fair. The girls get much nicer uniforms than we do.
You want to wear the girls' uniforms?
Yes, I think they give good freedom of movement, and they must be nice and cool in summer.
Oh man, you're weird. Why are you telling me this?
I think you will understand. I have watched you a lot. I think you are not like the others. I think we could become special friends. But now we are alone. Now is time for action, not words.
Mommy.
Yeah, what the hell? On to the gameplay. Future Perfect is a first-person shooter that, of course, takes you in various places of time. As said before, you'll go from early 20th century Scotland, late 1960s Europe, a haunted house infested with zombies and ghosts in the 90s, a futuristic corporation in vein of Perfect Dark, a futuristic warfare in vein of the Terminator, as well as a warfare set in a post-apocalyptic future. Even more settings can be found during arcade mode where you go up against bots. But Future Perfect improves on aspects from TimeSplitters 2 as well, besides having a more entertaining story. For one, the sci-fi handgun. Minus a cooler design, no longer has an obligatory reflective shot, which could kill even you if you're not careful. Instead, that is now a secondary mode and can now function like any other gun, which is fine by me. On top of that, many other guns would add a secondary fire mode like Perfect Dark, such as suppressors for pistols, two of them so ridiculous that they each have an attachable scope, and even a rocket launcher for an assault rifle, but the gadget worth the biggest mention is the temporal uplink, in where Cortez can use magnetism of sorts to help him get hard-to-reach items and solve puzzles. Hell, the campaign also adds driving to the mix, in where Cortez can pilot tanks and jeeps. Though they are short, they are better handled than when Halo handles it. As in, I get a better feel, especially when I have separate controls for the acceleration and the like. Not many moments of this though, but that's okay as it keeps up with the action. As with the previous installment, Future Perfect also comes with high replay value out of arcade mode, especially with Arcade League as well as Challenge mode, as each provide a set of rules to follow as you go up against bots. Though challenging with some frustration is always something that adds reason to replay, retries included. Granted, there are not many levels as TimeSplitters 2, but hey, there's still a decent amount. Plus, the inclusion of bots help make their multiplayer replayable if there are sadly no friends to play with, which has been really hard for me these days. The game has a map editor, and with online multiplayer support at the time, gamers could share their maps easy if you have your PlayStation 2 and Xbox online, which sadly wasn't the case for GameCube unless you had third-party accessories and applications that allowed for shared game saves you can download from your computer, or if you had friends with the game and you took your memory card to copy files. Unfortunately, the online for both the PlayStation 2 and Xbox has long since been down, and if you own the retro consoles, can only access if you, again, use third-party modifications of some sort. something that is way out of the question if you're playing on backwards compatible hardware like the Xbox One and its variants, as well as the Xbox Series. So for me, I have even less reason to play with customs, unlike what I recently did with PC shooters like Doom and Duke Nukem 3D. Even though I did experiment a lot with TimeSplitters 2, as I was mind blown by the concept at the time, but I digress. I gotta give props to the soundtrack by Graham Norgett, as well as Christian Marcuson. Much of the background music suits each level perfectly, with my favorite in particular being Scotland the Brave. Meanwhile, much of the sounds used for the action and gunfire work as well, even as some of them are reused from past games. Visually, while it shows its age of course, it still looks pretty charming and suits the goofy mood of the game well enough, and to add, the game still plays well after all these years, even as emulation on the Xbox One. Overall, TimeSplitters Future Perfect is still a blast to play with notable improvements over TimeSplitters 2. What does suck is that much of the online stuff is now officially blocked, so you might miss some conceptually cool stuff like sharing maps and playing with friends online, but the single player and local multiplayer content makes sure the game remains a blast to play.